We all know documentation records can be such a critical aspect to application. So when we're out spraying, making sure we're documenting the things like the weather, but what we're going to focus on right now are our tank mixes, are the chemicals that we're using within those tank mixes. So a tank mix, that's something like we have a carrier of water, maybe it's fertilizer, in certain instances, but it's the additional chemicals that we mix in with that recipe. So if we had Roundup or Status, Dicamba, Enlist, Liberty, all those different chemicals and their application rates as part of that tank mix is a critical aspect that we do want to make sure we can document it. So one thing within Operations Center we can do is if we know what those tank mixes are going to be ahead of time, we can actually create those in Operations Center. So when we get to the sprayer, we select that tank mix in our list and we're ready to go. It doesn't take as long to input all those different carriers, the rates, the products when we're in the display. Otherwise too, if we do have a tank mix in there and we do decide we need to tweak that tank mix because we want to change a rate on one of the products, we still have that ability within the display. So to create a tank mix in Operations Center, we're going to start in Setup and Products. So similar to where we've added our chemicals, we added our varieties, we have our tank mixes option. So currently in this Operations Center account, we have no tank mixes active. We can go into our archived list, and we do have quite a few tank mixes in this list. But we want to start with a clean list, clean slate. So we're going to go ahead and add a tank mix to create a new one. So first off, we're going to give it a name. So I always think about this as what application are we doing? Is it a burn down pass? Is it our post on corn? Is it a Liberty pass? Is it whatever makes sense? So we can name it however we want. I'm going to call this just post soybeans, and we'll leave it at that. Now, as we go through this tank mix, I'm going to add chemicals that probably won't even make sense, but it's just the practice of going through and creating the mix. So I've given it a name. Our target crop, we're going to be soybeans. We'll populate that in. And then our overall application rate. So this is what rate are we going to use with the sprayer. So are we 15 gallons per acre? Are we 20? Are we 25? Are we doing some nitrogen up to 50 gallons per acre? Right now we can determine what this is. This is going to help as we get our calculations on what our effective rates are. So we're going to go with 15 for the application rate on this one. Then tank size. So what volume tank do we have on our sprayer? So if we had a 616R, we're going to actually call this 1,600 gallons for our tank size. From here, we look at our carrier. So are we at water? We water, fertilizer? Have we created one? If we did a water fertilizer blend, something to that extent. We can only have one carrier on our list. Anything else we'd want to add, even if it is a high rate, we would still want to add that as a product. So we have our carrier. Let's go ahead and just add some products. So I'm just going to click through and grab our first 4 for an example, but you could go through here and search down your list. So anything that we would have already had it in our chemicals list, any herbicides, fertilizers, we will see in this list, and then we can add them across. You see something you don't have, we can go back to that add custom, just like we did previously. So we'll save these chemicals, we'll come down, then we need to assign the effective rate for them. So I'm going to switch this over to fluid ounces per acre. And we're going to say this one, we're running 16 ounces per acre. Right here, we're going to do, let's just say we're pints per acre, or we're 1. And again, this doesn't match the name of the chemicals. I'm just purely doing this as the exercise. Let's go back to fluid ounces again. And let's go 48. And, well, we'll just leave this as gallons per acre, and let's call it 0.5. So as we do this, our effective rate for our carrier also changes. So if we think about our 1,600 gallon tank, that water in this instance is not going to be all 1,600 gallons because of the other chemicals we're adding. So for per each tank load now, we're going to be about 1,480 gallons of water as part of that tank mix recipe. So then based off of each one of those, this is how many gallons we're going to have in each one. So on every fill, if we start from empty, we need 13.3 gallons of Bravo in this instance, just based off the name. So this is our tank or how many gallons of product we'll need for each tank fill. The other option is say I don't want to use this as 13.3 because I don't want to dump in 1/3 of a gallon. So another option we have is we can go to input by amount if we don't necessarily want to have partial fills. So if I wanted to fill everything based off of a gallons, if I wanted to put in 14 gallons versus those partial loads, we can leave them like that, but then that'll actually adjust what our effective rate is by using that amount. So if it was something that we were putting on 4.8 gallons and I'm using 2.5 gallon jugs, does it make sense to call it 5 gallons? And then what's that turn my effective rate on into for that chemical? So another way to think about it, if we want to adjust based off of what's more convenient from a filling standpoint, which might not always make the most sense either, but be aware that is an option in the input by amount. So if we go back to our application rates, I want 16 ounces here, or 1 pint. And so forth. So from here, we can save this. Otherwise, we can also print this tank mix, but we'll come look at that at another spot. So let's go ahead and save this tank mix. So like I said previously too, we can edit this tank mix. So if this tank mix is in the display and we decided to go from 16 ounces up to 20 ounces, we can still edit that tank mix in the display. So these aren't written in stone, but it will give you a good idea or a good starting point if we do need to modify from here. From here, if we select this, we can go back to this tank mix calculator. We see this tank mix pulled up, and we can actually print what this tank mix would look like. So right here as a PDF, this is what our products would be. If we're gonna have a partial tank load to finish this field based off of how many acres we're spraying. So let's say we're spraying 159.8 acres. If we wanna go to print, we will actually have that breakdown then. So for the full amount, then the partial amount, this is what we would need to finish based off of that field. So here's an idea of what your fill sheets could look like from that standpoint. But like I say, tank mixes can be a big deal if we think about documentation and accurate documentation of our products that we're spraying in the fields, whether we're still writing those down on a manual sheet from a documentation standpoint. This is going to document it in the display. We can get these maps back into Operations Center and see what the rates were. Then also in any reporting, how many gallons of X product did you use for the season from that standpoint. So critical to use tank mixes versus logging everything as a single product.